Bonjour from Côte d'Ivoire. Hello everyone from Ivory Coast. I'm here at the Kabbalistic Center, the Jewish community of Abidjan, the capital of Ivory Coast. This week's Parashat is Parashat VaYeshev. And Parashat VaYeshev is filled with stories. The main story being Yosef and his siblings. Yosef has dreams. His brothers don't like the interpretation of these dreams that he will eventually rule over them. But their story continues. Yaakov sends Yosef to go and check on his brothers. His brothers take this advantage, decide that they were going to kill him, eventually decide to throw him in a pit and sell him to the Ishmaelim. Yosef gets sold down into Egypt, and the story continues over there. Continues until Yosef eventually is in jail, and there's so many stories over there and stories in Egypt before Yosef eventually will go up into power. But there's two other things, interesting stories that are happening at the same time. One is after the story, Yehuda gives up and he goes to live alone. And the second one is how Yosef finds his siblings. One of the most crucial characters in this entire Parsha is a person that is not mentioned by name. We don't know anything about him. He's an Ish, an Adam, a person, maybe an angel, but does not know possibly how crucial he was to this entire story. When Yosef is going and looking for his brothers, he sees a man walking around and he asks him, he says, "Where are my brothers?" And he says, "I've heard your brothers said we're going to Dotan." And Yosef says, okay, and he follows this man's instructions and goes there. Imagine if Yosef would have not listened. Imagine if he would not have met this person. Imagine if this person did not hear what the brothers were saying. That is something very, very powerful. This whole person's essence in this world possibly was that one conversation telling Yosef, "I heard your brother saying we're going to go to Dotan." And this comes to tell us something very, very important. We don't really know our shlichut. You can hear this often by people telling stories and saying, this person said something that affected me in such a way, and the person will not know who they are. Such a story is one of the stories that inspired me very, very much on our shlichut. This was told by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha. And he told this in a Chabad conference in the Kenesh Shlichim Alami. He said there was once a shaliach who was given up all hope. He felt exhausted from all of his work in their shlichut. He says, and he goes to the Rebbe heartbroken. He says, "I have no more energy to deal with this." And the Rebbe tells him, he said, you may not know this, but a few years back on Parashat Vayera, you were talking about Avram and Sarah. And a guy walked into the class, sat in the back row, sat there for a bit. In the end of the class, he got up and left. You guys didn't exchange two words. You probably don't even know he exists. But this man went home afterwards and thought about his life. He said, "I come from Avram and Sarah, what dedicated Jews they were to God." Then they brought to the world Yitzchak. Yitzchak brought to the world Yaakov, the 12 tribes, and starts going through all of the history of the Jewish people. Says, he was thinking about getting married with his non-Jewish girlfriend of 3 years, and at that point he just broke down and said, "I cannot do it." And he decided that he was going to break it off with her and marry someone Jewish. He says, you don't even know how much that was your shlichut. He says, you don't know what you've done, how you've impacted people. When you walk down the street, the way you look at people, if you smile, if you're polite, if you say hi, sometimes that can be the whole essence of your life. I was once walking in the Midrachov in Yerushalayim, and I see this guy. He was a giant. Yeah, he was huge, towering over everyone. And I saw that he was looking down. And I went over and I asked him, I said, "Would you like a hug?" And the guy gave me a hug and started to cry and cry and cry. And he said, I'm I'm the invisible man. I've been walking around everywhere. I'm huge and no one can see me. He says I was on my way to kill myself. And that put me in such a different place of understanding who knows if my entire existence was for that one moment to save that person's life. Who knows if my entire day or a week or a year or whatever it was that pushed me to be in that midrachov, like clockwork. Maybe that's all that I needed. In the words of Mordechai to Esther and the story of Purim, Umi yodea im la'et kazot higat lemalchut. Who knows if your entire existence was for this one moment? Shabbat shalom.